The debate stage buzzed with electricity, the kind that made every camera flash feel like lightning in a storm. From the moment the lights hit the polished podiums, the tension was palpable. On one side stood Sarah Huckabee Sanders, her posture rigid, a smug smirk curling as if she already knew victory was hers. Across from her, Jasmine Crockett's calm presence cut through the noise, eyes steady, a quiet force radiating confidence that the room couldn't ignore. The moderator barely finished introducing the topic when Sanders leaned forward, her voice sharp and dismissive. "Honestly, I don't know how anyone takes you seriously," she said, her tone dripping with derision. A ripple of murmurs coursed through the audience. Some leaned forward, hungry for the drama. Others recoiled at the sheer audacity. Camera lenses clicked in rapid succession, capturing the flicker of Crockett's eyes as they narrowed, unshaken. Gasps punctuated the air as Sanders' insult landed with surgical precision. Yet Crockett didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, her posture unwavering, her calm authority speaking louder than any rebuttal could. The contrast was immediate: arrogance versus composure, bluster versus intellect. Every inch of Sanders' demeanor screamed overconfidence, while Crockett's silence promised depth and restraint, a storm brewing beneath a serene surface. The audience felt it, the room vibrating with unspoken tension. Reporters whispered into microphones, their words swallowed by the charged atmosphere. Flashbulbs popped, catching every glint of contempt in Sanders' eyes and the measured patience of Crockett's. The sound of a chair scraping echoed as a late-arriving spectator paused. Realizing they had walked into more than a debate, they had stepped into a moment that felt larger than politics, a battle of principles laid bare in real time. And then, as Sanders' smirk widened and she prepared to strike again with another cutting remark, Crockett lifted her hand ever so slightly, signaling the world that she was ready, not to react but to command. The tension swelled, every heartbeat synchronized to the drama unfolding on stage. The audience held its collective breath, aware that what came next would define more than just this debate. It would define who they saw as the voice of truth. But no one expected the moment that would leave everyone in shock. The lights on the stage dimmed slightly, as if the universe itself were drawing attention to the gravity of what was about to unfold. This wasn't merely a clash of personalities or party lines. It was a confrontation that carried the weight of a nation's conscience. Every word spoken tonight would ripple far beyond the velvet curtains and polished podiums. It was a debate over the very soul of America. In the charged atmosphere, viewers watching from homes, offices, and cafes across the country felt the tension settle into their bones. At stake were ideals that defined the nation: democracy under siege, social justice long delayed, accountability for those in power. Sanders, with her practiced combative style, was a force of aggression, aiming to dominate the narrative, to reduce complex issues to sound bites, to twist facts into shields for her arrogance. Her every glance and gesture carried the weight of entitlement, a subtle assertion that her interpretation of truth was untouchable. Yet Crockett's presence countered that force with a different kind of power, a quiet moral authority that demanded respect and careful listening. Crockett's poised stance was no accident. Every breath, every pause, every measured inflection carried the story of preparation, resilience, and principle. She knew that tonight, this moment, was about more than winning applause or scoring debate points. It was about setting a standard, showing that dignity and reason could withstand bluster and false bravado. For the audience who had long felt dismissed or marginalized, Crockett embodied a rare validation, that speaking truth with courage and integrity mattered, and that the forces of arrogance and aggression could, in fact, be confronted and held accountable. The moderators asked questions about policies, budgets, and social programs, but the underlying battle was ethical, symbolic. When Sanders began to interrupt with cutting sarcasm, the camera cut to Crockett's steady hands resting on the podium, eyes locked forward, lips barely twitching in acknowledgement but revealing nothing of internal distraction. It was a lesson in restraint, a subtle signal to the audience that real power was measured not in volume but in conviction. Every eye in the room, audience members, journalists, and even Sanders' own aides, sensed the tension. This was more than a debate. It was a turning point, a test of who would define the national conversation. Whispers began circulating across social media as live feeds caught the moment. Crockett calm, debate shock, truth over arrogance, all trended within minutes. The country was watching and viewers couldn't look away. The stakes were no longer hypothetical. They were immediate, tangible, and electrifying. Every supporter, critic, and undecided voter felt the pressure of anticipation, sensing that a defining moment was imminent. And as Sanders prepared her next attack, no one could have predicted the comeback that was coming. Sarah Huckabee Sanders had built her career on precision, control, and an unyielding presence that many considered both formidable and polarizing. Rising through the ranks of political communications, she earned her reputation as a sharp-tongued strategist, someone who could dominate press rooms, dismiss tough questions, and shape narratives with the confidence of a seasoned tactician. Headlines often painted her as unflinching, relentless, the person who could spin adversity into advantage. But behind the practiced smiles and rehearsed statements, a pattern emerged, one of arrogance, impatience with nuance, and a tendency to underestimate the quiet resilience of those she faced. Her career was dotted with moments that demanded both scrutiny and admiration. She had been praised for her ability to command media attention, to rally her base, and to deliver her message with clarity under pressure. Yet equally, there were missteps that hinted at vulnerability beneath the polished veneer. In press briefings that were supposed to showcase mastery, Sanders occasionally revealed a flash of frustration when faced with questions that didn't fit neatly into her prepared scripts. Observers noted a rigidness, a reliance on aggression over dialogue that often alienated moderate voices and galvanized critics. It was a style that worked in controlled environments, but it was fragile when confronted with unpredictability. Anecdotes from her past painted a picture of someone who thrived on dominance. During one televised exchange, she had dismissed a journalist's pointed question with a cutting remark that left the press corps in stunned silence. On another occasion, she had publicly belittled a political opponent, framing them as inexperienced and unqualified, only to face backlash when the target calmly rebutted with facts that undermined her narrative. Those moments, while often fleeting in the media cycle, accumulated like cracks in a carefully constructed facade. Hints that the invincible persona might falter under the right conditions. Sanders' approach was often to control the tempo, to speak first and frame the conversation on her terms. She had cultivated an image of dominance and confidence, but it came at a cost, a certain rigidity, an inability to adapt when the conversation shifted in unexpected ways. The arrogance that served her in familiar arenas could quickly become a liability when confronted with poise, intellect, and moral clarity. Critics had long speculated that while Sanders could dominate soundbites, she struggled when her words were met with composed defiance rather than panic or concession. And so here she stood on the debate stage, at the peak of her confidence, ready to deliver the verbal blows that had always served her well. The audience expected a familiar performance, sharp retorts, dismissive smirks, and the kind of theatrics that often left opponents scrambling. Yet there was a subtle shift in the energy tonight, an almost imperceptible unease that hadn't been present in countless prior appearances. The same force that had propelled her to the top now risked exposing her vulnerabilities, as if the universe itself were waiting for the moment when precision met principle, and aggression met unshakable composure. It was this tension that set the stage for what came next. Sanders's every gesture, every calculated smile, every poised rebuttal now carried dual meaning. Confidence for her supporters, but a foreshadowing of potential collapse for those watching closely. The cracks were not yet wide, but the foundation of invincibility was under scrutiny, and the audience could feel it. The contrast between her controlled aggression and the quiet moral power across the aisle was growing sharper, building suspense with every passing second. But across the aisle, Crockett's story was one Sanders couldn't possibly have prepared for. Jasmine Crockett's story was one of quiet determination, forged in the crucible of struggle and guided by an unwavering commitment to justice. Born into a family that valued hard work, integrity, and community, she learned early that life demanded more than words. It demanded action. From her childhood in modest neighborhoods to the halls of higher education, Crockett's path was never handed to her. Every opportunity she seized was earned, often in the face of systemic barriers and societal skepticism. Those experiences shaped a resilience that would later define her in the political arena. Even as a young adult, Crockett demonstrated a rare combination of intellect and empathy. She excelled academically, yet she never lost sight of the communities that raised her. tutoring younger students, volunteering at local centers, and advocating for underrepresented voices became routine acts that reflected a principle she carried into every facet of her life: that leadership is not about dominance, but about service. These formative experiences instilled a moral clarity that would distinguish her from the brash personalities she would later face on national stages. Her rise in politics was deliberate, marked by a series of calculated risks and courageous choices. Crockett didn't seek the spotlight for its own sake. She sought influence as a tool to effect change. Early campaigns taught her the power of listening, really listening to the people she aimed to serve. Legislative battles, often grueling and uncompromising, tested her mettle. She faced opponents who underestimated her, dismissing her youth, her background, or her approach. Yet in those moments, Crockett's responses were never reactive. She cultivated a mastery of debate through preparation, study, and a keen understanding of policy, learning to respond not just with facts, but with a moral weight that demanded attention. It was during these formative political skirmishes that Crockett honed her signature style: calm, authoritative, and unassailable. She learned to let others speak their arrogance into the open, only to dismantle it with precision and grace. Critics often assumed that her silence was uncertainty. They were invariably proven wrong. Her victories were never accidental. They were the culmination of persistence, courage, and an unshakable belief in the righteousness of her cause. Each win, each piece of legislation she shepherded through contentious debates, was a testament to the principle that integrity and intellect could triumph over spectacle and intimidation. Beyond the halls of power, Crockett's personal life reflected the same ethos. Friends and colleagues recount nights spent working on community initiatives, often sacrificing personal comfort to ensure others had a voice. There were moments of quiet heroism, helping a neighbor navigate a bureaucratic maze, supporting young activists facing harassment, or standing firm against entrenched interests despite personal risk. These moments, while rarely captured by headlines, built the foundation of a reputation that resonated with a wide audience. She wasn't just a politician. She was a symbol of resilience and moral certainty, someone who embodied the possibility that courage combined with principle could alter the course of events. As Crockett's public profile grew, so did the attention from critics and challengers. Each attack, each attempt to undermine her became an opportunity to demonstrate composure and intellectual rigor. She faced attempts to belittle her, to portray her as inexperienced or overly idealistic, yet every calculated insult only reinforced her image as the inevitable victor. Her ability to navigate conflict with poise and authority became a narrative in itself, a story that audiences across the country followed with admiration and hope. By the time she stepped onto the debate stage opposite Sanders, Crockett carried with her not just the experience of campaigns and legislative battles, but the weight of her journey, the lessons of her community, and the quiet power of resilience. Her presence demanded attention, not through theatrics or aggression, but through an unspoken confidence that she was prepared for whatever came next. Every pause, every measured glance, every carefully chosen word reflected a lifetime of preparation, a story of struggle transformed into mastery, a moral compass aligned with the values of integrity, service, and courage. The audience could sense it, even before a single word of the debate was exchanged. Here was someone who had faced opposition and emerged stronger, someone who had endured personal and political trials and refined them into unshakable strength. Crockett was not merely participating in a debate. She was embodying the possibility that truth and dignity could prevail in a world too often dominated by arrogance and posturing. And now, standing in front of Sanders, Crockett was ready to show why she could not be shaken. The debate erupted into motion the moment the moderator posed the first contentious question. Sanders wasted no time, leaning forward with a practiced glare, her voice slicing through the room. "Let's be honest," she began. "Your policies sound good on paper, but do you really think they work in the real world?" The remark drew a ripple of murmurs from the audience, some skeptical, some eager to see the confrontation unfold. Cameras zoomed in on her smirk, capturing every flicker of confidence that suggested she already anticipated victory. Crockett remained unmoved. She inhaled slowly, her composure a sharp contrast to Sanders's escalating aggression. Her voice, measured and deliberate, responded not with insult, but with clarity. "We have to judge policies by their impact, not by fear. she said, each word resonating with precision. The room leaned in. Her calm authority created a palpable tension, the kind that makes an audience hold its breath. Sanders's smirk faltered ever so slightly, a subtle crack that few noticed but the crowd instinctively sensed. Sanders pressed harder, launching into a series of rapid-fire attacks, her tone increasingly sharp, almost desperate. You talk about justice, but you ignore the economic realities. How can anyone take this seriously? The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sweat began to appear on her brow, a testament to the intensity that was beginning to slip beyond her control. The camera caught every micro-expression, tightening jaw, flicking eyes, a hand that tapped nervously on the podium. The contrast with Crockett, who remained statuesque, became almost theatrical. Every pause she took amplified her presence, each glance deliberate, commanding attention without raising her voice. Audience reactions punctuated the rising tension. Gasps, whispers, and the occasional clapping broke out as Crockett's measured responses landed with undeniable force. Journalists leaned forward. Pens paused mid-note, sensing the drama unfolding in real time. Social media feeds lit up, trending hashtags appearing in mere moments. Crowned Crockett calm, tried debate shock, to truth vs arrogance. The energy was contagious. Viewers at home felt themselves drawn into the room, their anticipation mirrored by the audience's rising murmur. Sanders' frustration mounted visibly. She gestured aggressively, attempting to dominate the conversation, to overpower with volume what Crockett had mastered through reason and presence. Yet each attempt only highlighted her instability. The clash was no longer about policy alone. It had become a study in temperament, a battle of character. Crockett's silence between Sanders' assaults became a strategic canvas, her eyes steady, her posture unyielding, her voice ready but restrained. Every moment she held back built suspense, a tension that crackled like static through the auditorium. The debate's rhythm intensified as Sanders tried to corner Crockett with layered questions, intended to provoke missteps. Each question meant debate was met with careful precision. Crockett's responses were surgical in their logic, moral in their framing, and calm in their delivery. The crowd's reaction oscillated between shock and admiration. Even Sanders' allies could sense the balance of power subtly shifting. The energy in the room was almost unbearable, the weight of impending revelation hanging in every pause, every stare, every measured syllable, and then, in a moment that would be replayed across the nation, Crockett struck back. Crockett inhaled, letting the room's tension settle around her like a heavy fog. She had listened, measured, absorbed every barbed remark, every attempt at provocation from Sanders. Then, with a subtle shift of her posture, she leaned into the microphone, her voice low, steady, and deliberate. "Let's speak plainly," she began, and the room seemed to lean closer, as if her calm command pulled the audience in by gravity alone. "Our responsibility isn't to perform for applause or headlines. It's to serve the people, to uphold justice, to act with integrity even when it's inconvenient." A pause, just a breath. And in that pause, every journalist, every audience member, every camera lens seemed to capture the moment. The weight of authority, the clarity of purpose. Sanders' eyes flickered, a brief shadow of unease crossing her carefully controlled expression. She had faced many opponents, but the quiet force before her wasn't reacting. It was asserting an undeniable truth. Crockett continued, layering her rebuttal with both facts and moral reasoning. "You claim to understand economics, but ignore the people who struggle under the very policies you defend. You speak of experience, yet dismiss those whose voices have been historically silenced. Leadership isn't about shouting over dissent. Leadership is about listening, learning, and doing what's right, even when it's hard." Her words were deliberate, each phrase measured for maximum resonance, each sentence building a rhythm that made Sanders' usual bluster seem hollow by comparison. The audience shifted in their seats. A whisper here, a nod there, gasps of astonishment punctuated the silence. One commentator's live reaction captured the collective sentiment. "She's dismantling the argument without raising her voice. Incredible." Another camera cut to Sanders, who was blinking rapidly, her lips pressed into a thin line. The carefully cultivated armor of confidence began to show cracks. Her gestures, once precise and dominating, became slightly erratic. The microphone trembled under her tightening grip. Crockett pressed on. "We talk about justice, about equality, about democracy, but words without action are empty. We have to hold ourselves accountable first, not just point fingers. We have to face uncomfortable truths, not dodge them behind slogans. The question isn't who can shout the loudest, it's who can stand unwavering when the world is watching. The room was nearly silent, yet every heart felt the force of her presence. Every camera caught Sanders' subtle flinch, the tight set of her shoulders, the fleeting frustration in her eyes. Social media, already buzzing, erupted mid-sentence. Screens lit up with live tweets, clips looping endlessly. Trish's Crockett calm. She shoot truth wins. Debate mic drop. Influencers shared snippets in real time. Hashtags trended nationally, and live streams spiked as viewers across the country tuned in to witness the unraveling spectacle. Every pause, every deliberate inflection, every calm rebuttal amplified Crockett's moral and intellectual dominance. Even her critics couldn't ignore the power of precision tempered with principle. Crockett didn't rush. She allowed the weight of each point to settle before moving to the next. "History doesn't remember the loudest voices," she said, her gaze sweeping the room, locking with Sanders for a moment that felt eternal. "It remembers the courageous ones, the ones who stood for right when it was easier to bow, the ones who acted with dignity when ridicule was easier than resolve." A hush fell over the audience, as if even the air itself acknowledged the gravity of her words. Sanders' usual counterattacks faltered. The lines she had prepared in her mind, the rehearsed sharpness, seemed suddenly irrelevant. The drama heightened as Crockett shifted to policy specifics, her rebuttal now blending tangible evidence with moral clarity. "Look at the data," she said, pulling numbers, examples, and precedent into her argument. "Communities that have been ignored for decades show measurable progress when policies prioritize equity, transparency, and accountability. Pretending that dismissive rhetoric can solve structural problems is not leadership. It's negligence." Every citation, every reference landed like precision strikes, methodically undermining Sanders' claims without a hint of aggression. The audience was spellbound, murmurs rising into a crescendo of admiration. Sanders attempted to respond, to reclaim the stage, but the words came out fragmented, defensive. The energy she had relied upon, the aggression, the bluster, the instinct to dominate, was now turned inward, revealing her vulnerability. She gestured, opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. But Crockett's calm insistence had shifted the momentum entirely. Every movement, every glance was now being measured against Crockett's unwavering poise. The contrast was stark: chaos versus control, arrogance versus dignity, noise versus resonance. The camera captured every detail. A close-up of Sanders' hand tapping nervously, a wide shot of the audience leaning forward holding their collective breath. Crockett's slight smile, almost imperceptible, suggested neither triumph nor malice, only a quiet certainty that truth, patience, and courage had finally claimed the moment. The room became a stage for moral and intellectual clarity, every observer acutely aware that something historic was unfolding in real time. As Crockett continued, social media reached fever pitch. Clips were replayed, dissected, and shared across platforms. The hashtags multiplied: mic drop moment, Crockett wins, debate for the ages. Influencers, journalists, and commentators speculated, praised, and analyzed every word. The nation was watching not just a debate, but a demonstration of how leadership grounded in integrity could confront and unseat arrogance with composure alone. And then, just as the final rebuttal landed, Crockett paused. Silence stretched across the auditorium like a held breath. Every camera, every eye, every microphone captured that stillness. She had delivered her message, each point precise, each argument clear, each moral principle unshaken. Sanders' previous confidence had dissipated entirely, leaving the room with an undeniable sense of resolution before any official conclusion had been reached. The audience erupted in whispers and stunned applause, some rising to their feet in disbelief, others caught in a moment of awe. Social media's reaction intensified further, clips going viral almost instantly. The narrative was no longer about Sanders' attack or Crockett's defense. It was about the sheer force of truth expressed calmly, unshakably, and with moral clarity. Every corner of the debate stage, every lens, every screen now reflected the same story. The hero had delivered a mic drop that would resonate long after the cameras turned off. The room fell silent, and then the world exploded online. Within minutes of the debate's climax, social media erupted. Clips of Crockett's calm, devastating rebuttal circulated like wildfire, looping endlessly across feeds, shared by millions who couldn't stop watching. Hashtags like Dr. Crockett Calm, Dr. Truth Wins, and Mic Drop Moment trended nationally within the hour, dominating conversations from Twitter to TikTok. Influencers posted breakdowns of every point she made, while late-night hosts replayed the moment with awe, emphasizing how a poised, intelligent response could silence even the most aggressive opponent. Memes began to flood the internet, exaggerating Sanders' increasingly flustered reactions. Some portrayed her smirk frozen in disbelief, others highlighted her hand tapping nervously, captions ranging from biting sarcasm to celebratory humor. Across platforms, the narrative was clear. Arrogance had met its match. The internet had collectively acknowledged the moral and intellectual victory that Crockett had achieved, and users reveled in the satisfaction of seeing a dominant figure humbled through reason and composure rather than spectacle. Commentators and pundits weighed in with unprecedented unanimity. Analysts dissected every line of Crockett's delivery, noting her precision, restraint, and moral clarity. Even politicians, long wary of the debate stage, praised her ability to speak truth with poise. "That's the kind of leadership America needs," one senator tweeted. "Not bluster, not shouting, courage and principle." Meanwhile, Sanders faced scrutiny from her own base and beyond. Op-eds questioned whether her combative style, effective in controlled environments, could withstand opponents who wielded integrity and intellect as weapons. News cycles replayed the moment repeatedly, each replay a reminder of the shift in perception that had occurred in a single evening. The ripple effect was immediate and measurable. Donations to Crockett's initiative surged, reflecting newfound support and momentum from a captivated audience. Calls for interviews, invitations to speaking engagements, and offers to participate in panels poured in. The political conversation shifted overnight. What had begun as a single debate now became a case study in leadership, resilience, and the power of controlled, purposeful communication. Analysts noted that Crockett had redefined how political debates could be won, not through theatrics, but through reasoned clarity, moral courage, and undeniable presence. For the audience, the emotional payoff was profound. Viewers who had long felt marginalized, silenced, or dismissed saw in Crockett's victory validation of their own beliefs, their own principles. It wasn't simply a personal win. It was symbolic, a statement that truth and integrity could confront arrogance and triumph. Social media echoed this sentiment. Heart emojis, celebratory gifs, and streams of comments reflected a collective exhale, a mixture of relief, pride, and exhilaration. The moment resonated not just as a debate win, but as a shared experience, uniting people around the idea that justice and moral courage were not abstract ideals, they were tangible, observable, and achievable. Even beyond the immediate fervor, Crockett's performance began to influence broader political discourse. Lawmakers and activists referenced her points in interviews and policy discussions, while educators and civic groups shared clips to highlight examples of effective ethical leadership. The debate became a touchstone, a reference point for conversations about how to confront arrogance, handle public scrutiny, and assert authority without sacrificing composure or principle. The influence of one poised, deliberate voice extended far beyond the stage, shaping perceptions, inspiring action, and altering the trajectory of political dialogue. Meanwhile, Sanders' camp struggled to regain control of the narrative. Attempts to downplay the moment only reinforced its impact, with every rebuttal scrutinized for signs of desperation or deflection. The stark contrast between the two figures, the unshakable hero and the increasingly rattled antagonist, dominated commentary and cemented Crockett's moral and intellectual victory. In the public imagination, the audience, both present and remote, felt the satisfaction of seeing arrogance confronted by calm, reasoned authority, a lesson in power, restraint, and the enduring impact of integrity. The debate had ended, but its consequences were only beginning to unfold. Crockett's performance became a benchmark for effective leadership, a reminder that poise, preparation, and principle could command attention and respect far more than aggression ever could. Audiences shared the clips with pride, cited the phrases in discussions, and embraced Crockett's example as both inspiration and validation. The moment had transcended partisan lines, becoming a cultural touchstone for how dignity and clarity could reshape expectations, perceptions, and outcomes. But the story wasn't over. This clash would leave lessons for everyone watching. The echoes of the debate lingered long after the final words had been spoken, reverberating through both the auditorium and the hearts of viewers across the nation. Crockett's victory was not measured merely in applause or trending hashtags. It was a triumph of principle, a demonstration that dignity, integrity, and service endure far longer than arrogance and bluster. She had transformed a moment of confrontation into a universal lesson, one that transcended politics and spoke to the core of what leadership, morality, and courage truly mean. As Crockett addressed the room one final time, her voice soft yet unwavering, she reframed the clash with a perspective that resonated deeply. "Tonight," she said, "wasn't about winning a debate. It was about affirming a simple truth, that when we act with honesty, humility, and purpose, we create a standard for others to follow. Arrogance may speak loudly, but it fades. Integrity, service, and courage, these endure." The audience absorbed every word, feeling the weight of her conviction. Even those who disagreed politically couldn't ignore the power of clarity and principle delivered with calm authority. The imagery of the moment was cinematic. Crockett stepped away from the podium, her movements measured and deliberate, each step reinforcing the message she had conveyed. Supporters rose to their feet, cheering, tears glistening in some eyes, faces glowing with the exhilaration of witnessing not just a political victory, but a moral one. The energy of hope seemed to radiate outward, reaching into living rooms, offices, and cafes, connecting people through the shared experience of truth prevailing. Her calm smile, paired with the collective roar of admiration, created a tableau that would be remembered long after the debate ended. Crockett's moral framing extended beyond the specifics of policy or party lines. She reminded viewers that the essence of leadership and public service is not the accumulation of power, but the responsibility to act ethically, even when it is inconvenient, unpopular, or met with hostility. She highlighted the importance of perseverance, of standing firm when faced with intimidation, and of letting principles guide actions rather than personal gain or pride. For the audience, the lesson was immediate and relatable. Courage and integrity are not abstract ideals. They are living practices that shape communities, influence change, and leave legacies that outlast any moment of arrogance. The crowd, both in the auditorium and online, experienced a profound emotional payoff. Social media feeds were filled with expressions of hope, admiration, and gratitude. Viewers shared clips with captions reflecting personal resonance, parents highlighting the example for their children, young activists inspired to engage, and everyday citizens encouraged to stand firm in their convictions. Crockett's performance became a blueprint for how moral authority can confront aggression and how calm, principled leadership can turn moments of conflict into opportunities for collective inspiration. As she walked off the stage, the music swelled softly in the background, cinematic and uplifting, reinforcing the emotional resonance of the moment. Her supporters' cheers rose in harmony with the sense of purpose Crockett embodied. The visual, a composed, confident leader leaving the stage after dismantling arrogance with intellect, empathy, and courage, etched itself into the memory of all who witnessed it. It was not just a political victory. It was an affirmation that values, when upheld consistently, create impact far beyond a single debate or a single night, and so, the story left the audience with more than admiration. It left them with moral clarity, a sense of empowerment, and the reminder that leadership grounded in integrity and service is always remembered, always respected, and always victorious. The contrast between fleeting arrogance and enduring principle had never been so stark, so clear, or so inspiring, because in the end, this was never just a debate. It was a lesson in courage and truth. Tonight we witnessed more than a debate. We saw a clash of ideologies, a confrontation between arrogance and integrity, and a vivid demonstration of what true leadership looks like. Sanders' attacks, sharp and relentless, collided with Crockett's unwavering calm, her moral clarity cutting through the noise with precision. The result was a moment that captivated the nation, inspired millions, and reminded us all that courage, preparation, and principle can triumph over bluster and intimidation. Crockett didn't just defend her policies, she defended the values we all hold dear: dignity, accountability, and service. She showed that standing firm, speaking truth, and acting with integrity is more powerful than any verbal barrage or political spectacle. And in doing so, she offered a lesson for everyone watching: that leadership rooted in principle can influence hearts, minds, and communities far beyond the walls of a debate stage. If you were inspired by what you saw tonight, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel to stay connected to stories that matter, share this video to spark conversations, and join the movement of viewers who value truth, courage, and integrity in action. Your voice, your engagement, and your awareness make a difference. Every like, share, and comment spreads the message further, showing that the world is paying attention to leaders who lead with principle. Step into the conversation, be a part of the ripple effect, and let these moments remind you that each of us has the power to stand for what's right, to challenge arrogance, and to uphold the values that define our communities. The debate is over, but the impact is just beginning. Take what you've seen, carry it forward, and remember, courage and integrity never go unnoticed.